Great, so today I wanted to make a video on this story. It's out of Bloomberg, and it's titled China Set for Massive Coal Expansion and Threat to Climate Goals. And the point of this video is going to be to call out the climate change activists and all these people who claim to care so much about climate change. And I made videos about it before, but considering how big of an issue this is, at least to them, not to me and to people who would agree with me, I need to make a video on this because anybody who wants to look at this from an objective point of view would look at it and say, if climate change is this big issue and humans are causing it, and it's because of coal-fired power plants, oil and gas, all that kind of stuff, then we should be spending the overwhelming majority of our time criticizing and trying to get China and, to a slightly lesser degree, India to change their policies on this kind of stuff because they're the ones. I mean, between China and India, I believe they're the majority. I think it's a pretty clear majority of emissions are from just those two countries. In Canada, we're like 1%, and if we implement all this stuff that the Trudeau government wants to put in, we're literally talking about maybe single digit percentages of less carbon output. And considering we're 1%, we're talking about, even if the Trudeau government puts in all their policies and they work exactly how good they want them to work, which never happens. Things never happen as good as you hope they will. But let's just assume they do. We're talking about maybe a 0.1% change in carbon emissions, and CO2 is about, I think, 15-20% of the Earth's greenhouse gases. So we're literally talking about less than 0.1. We're talking about 0.02, 0.03% change in carbon output if Canada gets everything done and it happens 100% as good as they want. Which makes no sense. And if you actually cared about the climate, again, like I've said, I've made videos about this before, and other people make videos about it before, but we need to keep making videos about it until the public finally gets this through their head that if climate change is this big issue, which I don't think it's anywhere close to a big issue, but let's just assume it is, for sake of argument, then you should be railing against China and railing against India for their carbon outputs because they're building coal-fired power plants while we're shutting all ours down. Now, I don't know if you can see it or not, but at the bottom there, the nation of China has about 148 gigawatts of coal-fired capacity under active construction or likely to be resumed. Um, the entire European Union has about 150, and the rest of the world has about 105. So, in other words, China has about as much coal fire. They have about as much coal fire power plants. I don't know why I can't say that, but they have about as much currently being used and or under construction as the rest of the world does. So again, it makes absolutely no sense that if you believe it's this big issue to not talk about it with China. Like that should be like every dollar we have currently put towards it, it should be put towards not a carbon tax or any of this com- complete BS, which is really just an excuse for the government to tax us more and to have more power. Because if you're on the left, your goal isn't the lies that you say or the manipulation that you say. It's about giving government more power. Like again, that's the one thing that just can't stand about the left, and even moderates say this all the time. And I'm even leftist moderates, people that lean left. The left is never honest about their intentions. They say that they care about climate change because they care about the future, but yet they completely ignore a crumbling deficits in the West, which again are going to have to be paid back by the next generation. Which, if you claim to care so much about the next generation, well, you should care about the national debt, which they don't. So it's completely safe to say that the only reason that I'm not the only reason, but the main reason that they claim to care so much about climate change is because they view it as a way of increasing government power through taxation, through more regulation, all this kind of stuff. And again, the fundamental reason of a leftist government is to increase government power, right? They want more government control over the economy. That's not debatable. I don't care what you say. That's not debatable. The basics difference between the left and the right is that the left wants more government power and the right wants less. Okay, that's not debatable. That's not even taking sides, right? That's just a fact. The right wants less, the left wants more. If climate change is this big, massive issue, well, then it would be completely sane, and anyone in the right mind would want the government to have more power, because if climate change is this big issue, well, the government must be the only one that could solve it, right? But I mean, that's, again, it's a lie. But basically, the whole point of the video being, like I said, like I've said it before, if climate change is this big issue, then climate change activists should be spending all their time railing against China and trying to get them to change their policies, and railing against India and trying to get them to change their policies, but they're not. So by default, just because they're not doing that shows that they either have nefarious intentions and they're just claiming to care about the climate and to care about climate change to get their nefarious intentions pushed through, or they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And it depends, depending on who you are, of the people that believe it or claim to believe it, you're a different person. The everyday climate change activist, that are going to these, rallies, the Greta Thunberg climate change rallies, or whatever you want to call it, those are just the people that have no idea what they're talking about. And for the basic fact that whenever you talk to these kind of people, they can never cite tangible arguments that support their position. It's always just repeating the talking points that they've been told. It's climate change is real, and all scientists agree, like crap like that. They never actually dig deep. See, the fundamental way that you can tell when you're having a debate with someone that they've done their homework on the topic is if they can cite the other side's argument as good or better than the average person who is on the other side. Like, that's the best way you can tell, because if they can do that, you can tell that they've spent as much or more time as the people who are on that side. So, like I said, the problem with climate change is that they don't have a good argument. That's the one thing that they really don't have a good argument for. It's claiming that all scientists agree, which they don't. A lot of them do, but a lot of that is because they're basically paid to agree with the consensus, or whatever you want to call it. And a lot of them disagree. A lot of them disagree on the extent of how bad it is. So there isn't this big consensus, and even if there was, science isn't run by consensus. If there was, then, well, the Earth would still be the center of the solar system. Doctor or healthcare technology would not have gotten any better, because we'd still be thinking that mental illness was caused by like demons or some crap like that they used to believe back in the day. But that's another issue, another thing that I don't really want to talk about. But basically, to sum it all up, the one thing that I said that bothers me about the left is that they have no idea why the other side believes what they believe. Like, no idea. And you can look up. I literally made a video on it. Jonathan Haidt has done research on this, and they found that moderates and conservatives can predict leftists why they believe what they believe and all that kind of stuff, and the left can't. And it's for the simple reason that if the left understood why they're right and moderates believe what they believe, well, they would quickly recognize that their own beliefs aren't grounded in anything tangible. They're just, for lack of a better way of putting it, just complete in-group preference. I would say a better way of putting it would be just blind in-group preference. And generally, there are people that are more susceptible to propaganda, all this kind of stuff. Because even if you believe in climate change, just for sake of argument, let's say that climate change is completely real. Expecting the government to fix the problem is insane. So even if you believe in it and your solution to it is to give the government more power, well, let's look at, like I said, homelessness in places like California. The government, like I said, the Democrats can literally pass whatever policy they want. There are Democrats from literally the bottom to the tippy top. There would be no disagreement whatsoever on any policy they want to pass. But they don't fix the problem, because if they fix the problem, all of a sudden their voter base shrinks up. And like I said, leftist governments always get elected by not always, but the overwhelming majority of the time, they get elected by promising people free stuff, and then once they're elected, by promising to keep or increase the amount of free stuff given out. So if the supply of homelessness goes down, or people who are on welfare, well, then all of a sudden, their voter base dries up, because if people are working and making money for themselves, well, they don't want to give as much of it to the government. So it's very simple. So getting back to the whole climate change point, if you believe that climate change is real and it's this big issue, well, expecting government to fix the problem is insane, because point to me another big issue in society that government has fixed, or an issue in society that government claims to be a big issue that they fixed. Like, there isn't any. I mean, they claim to care so much about, like, the poor and homelessness, as it technically standards of living have gone up, but that's almost entirely due to capitalism, and the fact that, you have heating, air conditioning, running water, electricity, all that kind of stuff. If there wasn't any of that, well, the standard of living wouldn't really have gone up. The left claims to care so much about gun violence and all this stuff, even though in Canada they've gotten every gun control policy, aside from completely banning all guns, implemented. Has gun crime gone down? Well, no, it's going up in places like Toronto and Vancouver and these big cities. So again, point to me a policy that the government has claimed to have been this big issue that they figured out. Well, they haven't, because if they figure it out, well, then people don't have reason to vote for a big government that's going to promise to solve all people's problems. And it's like I said, the two different groups of people that believe in climate change. The governments that at the top, those are the people that have the nefarious intentions. They generally are people that want power, they want to make money, they want to have control over people, so they're lying to them to get their way. And they recognize that the majority of people are, for lack of a better way of putting it, dumb enough to fall for it. So and then there's the majority of people, like they say, the everyday climate change activist that's just fell for the propaganda and, fell hook, line, and sinker. And like I said, if they actually knew what they were talking about, then they would be able to cite the other side's arguments as good or better as them and refute them. But they don't. They'll always accuse you of, being a climate change denier. If you're debating them on immigration, it's you're a racist. If you're debating them on, anything to do with social issues, it's because you're a racist, sexist, homophobe, whatever ist or phobe that they'll just point out. Like I said, the best way of telling if someone on the other side or on your side knows what they're talking about is that they can cite the other side's best arguments and refute them, and they'll cite the other side's arguments better than the other, as good or better than the average person on the other side, and they'll be able to refute them easily. But calling someone names or saying that all scientists agree isn't an argument, right? Like, all scientists used to agree that the Earth was the center of the solar system. That doesn't mean anything. And number one, that was a cherry-picked study to begin with. So, like I said, I think I've talked about enough for this issue, but basically, to sum it all up, if climate change is this big, huge issue, then we should not be spending 1 minute protesting pipelines in Canada or anything in Canada or the U.S. Like, you shouldn't be protesting coal power plants. You shouldn't be protesting any of this kind of stuff. You shouldn't be worried about trying to reduce emissions in Canada by 5%. Like, it's like dumping a beer in the ocean and thinking that if you drink it you'd get drunk off it. It's like the equivalent to it. So yeah, like if climate change is this big issue, by all means, go talk to China, go talk to India, but you know that they're going to tell you to F off, so you don't do it. And the main reason you believe in climate change is, like I say, just a virtue signal. So I'm going to leave it there. If you liked the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.